Today we are supposed to work on adjective clauses. Actually, last session we covered noun clauses and we learned how to use noun clause connectors correctly. And sometimes we saw that the noun clause connectors can function as the subject of the clause. Um, an adjective clause, also known as a relative clause, and it is a type of dependent clause that works to describe a noun in a sentence. So it comes immediately after the noun, and we call this noun antecedent, and it post modifies the noun. And because it is a clause, it has its own subject and verb. Adjectival clause or adjective clause can function as an adjective. Uh, you know that the adjective is a verb, but here we have a group of words, and it is uh, made up of subject and verb. Let's see what is an adjectival clause. I need your help to go through the slides one by one.
Hello.
Will you help me?
Yes, sure.
Will you please speak louder?
Is it better now? It's better now?
It is getting better. Go on, please.
Okay. Again, I'm so sorry to hear about your mother-in-law. I hope it gets easier.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Go on,
Uh,
please.
what is an adjective clause? An adjective clause, also called adjectival or relative clause, is a dependent clause that modifies a noun or a pronoun. It tells what kind, which one, or how many adjective clauses almost always come right after the nouns they modify. There is the mountain that we are going to climb. My
Well,
blue tennis.
as you see here, there is initiating the sentence, but it is not the subject. Actually, it is expletive, fills the place of the real subject in the sentence. The subject of the sentence is the mountain. When we initiate the sentence with here, there, and over, we have the inversion. So the subject goes immediately after the verb. So here we have the subject. There is a noun markers, and the mountain is the subject. It's a noun. If we describe this mountain and tell about this noun, uh, uh, we need dependent clause. So this dependent clause is called adjectival. There is the mountain that we are going to climb. So it tells which one or what kind. Go on, my blue tennis shoes.
My blue tennis shoes, which used to be my mom's, were under the bed.
Very good. Here the subject is shoes because my is a noun marker. It is a possessive adjective. Blue
Mhm.
is the color, it's again adjective. Tennis is a noun, and a noun can come before another noun and function as a noun marker. So shoes is the first noun. It is plural and it requires a plural verb. So as you see here, we have the verb were, and you see they have set off the subject from the verb by some intervening elements, and this intervening element is surrounded by two commas. So here it shows that it is non-essential. We will talk about the restrictive and non-restrictive, or essential and non-essential adjectival clauses. So when the information is not needed, it is something extra, we can just put it within the two commas. Okay, so this is our main clause. Shoes were under the bed, and we have embedded this, which used to be my mom's. So this is an adjectival clause. It has its own subject, it has its own verb, and here it has its own connector. Go on, please, Daniel.
Daniel, who was late again today, sits next to me in English.
Daniel sits next to me in English. It means an English class, okay? So
Mhm.
here Daniel is the subject, and we have the verb sits here, and there is an agreement between subject and verb. And as you see, this intervening element has been set off by two commas. We never ever set off the subject from the verb with a comma. but we are allowed to put two commas and some intervening elements such as adjectival clause or a positive or parenthetical expressions can come within the two commas and set off the subject from the verb. Well, sometimes we can bring the prepositional phrases there. Anyway, so using dependent clause is a way of combining sentences. When we want to make a complex sentence, we can embed this adjectival clause into the sentence. And as you see, it can come either in the final position or in mid position. No adjectival clause initiates the sentence because the adjectival clause just follow the noun. They just come immediately after the noun. And this noun is called antecedent. So the mountain, shoes, or Daniel are the antecedents, and actually we modify these words. So no adjectival clause initiates the sentence. We can later we will learn that we can reduce non-essential adjectival clauses and then move them to initial position. So in that case, it is possible. Anyway, here, and that is not again the clause. That will be the modifying phrase. A modifying phrase can initiate the sentence, but a modifying clause, which is adjectival or relative clause, cannot initiate the sentence. Using dependent clauses is a way of combining sentences. You see, we have two independent clauses here. Daniel was late again today. Daniel sits next to me in English. So here we have two simple sentences. Instead of writing two simple sentences, because the subjects are the same, we can just drop one of the subjects and use one of the relative pronouns. And this relative pronoun just connects two parts. So we will see Daniel, who was late again, sits next to me in English. Well, let's go with components of the adjectival clause. Actually, there are three different traits when we are studying the adjectival clause. We have to see what are these requirements and how we can meet these three requirements. When we are analyzing a sentence, first we need to see whether there is a subject and verb. If there is, okay, so it is a clause. Then we will begin to see, is there any relative pronoun or relative adverb? So it shows that even the relative adverbs can make adjectival clause. This is an adverb when, where, and why. It shows the time, place, and the reason, but they come immediately after the noun and they post modify the noun, and that is why they function as an adjective rather than adverb. So these are the connectors, and finally it will function as an adjective. So we should find an answer for these questions: what kind, how many, or which one. If we can see all these three traits or requirements, so, or if we have these three traits, in that case, we can say that we have an adjectival clause which post modifies a noun. As you see here, the rat that John saw yesterday was in the kitchen. There is a noun marker, rat is, and the rat was in the kitchen. This is our main clause. But we see another clause has been embedded into this one, into this main clause. So that John saw yesterday. That is a connector. John is the subject, then saw is the verb. So we have the subject and verb, we have the relative pronoun, and we see that it gives information about the rat, the animal which John saw yesterday. Okay, as you see here, the tramp who claimed to have a limp sprinted after the bus. So the tramp sprinted after the bus. A tramp is a homeless person, okay, and he actually claimed that he cannot walk properly, okay, have a limp. But suddenly we see he runs as fast as possible to catch the bus, to take the bus. So the tram sprinted after the bus. But which tram? The tram who claimed to have a limp. So this gives information about the trap. And as you see here, we have subject and a verb. But here the subject is the relative pronoun, and at the same time it functions as the subject. And the clause has its own verb. So I see the subject and a verb, I see the connector, and I see that they answer the question which tram. So they give information about or tell information about the tram. As you see, the adjective clauses will follow one of these two patterns. From now on, whether we will have a relative pronoun or relative adverb. If we have a relative adverb, immediately after that, we expect to see the subject and verb. So the relative adverb plus subject and verb. This is one way. Maybe there is a relative pronoun as a connector and a subject and a verb, like this. Here we have the subject. So the relative pronoun does not function as the subject. It is a connector. And the second pattern is the relative pronoun only. So we can't expect relative adverb function as a subject. A pronoun can function as a noun because pro means instead of noun, pronoun. So it can function as a subject, but adverb cannot function as a subject. So we can't expect a clause without the subject. That is why immediately after the when, where, and why, we see the subject. But after relative pronouns, we can have either a subject or that relative pronoun can function as the subject and as connector at the same time. Sarvnaz, will you continue? Thank you.
Sure. Scale 2. Use adjective clause connectors correctly. An
Skill
adjective
11. Okay, we already covered. This is by the book. Actually, I have gathered extra information, and it is beyond the the scope of the book. So you see extra information, and it is compatible with the book, but it adds extra information because the book does not talk anything about relative pronouns. But we should know that the relative pronouns can function as an adjective clauses. Go on.
An adjective clause is a clause that describes a noun. Because the clause is an adjective, it is positioned directly after the noun that it describes. The woman is filling the glass that she put on the table. The glass that she put on the table contains milk.
Very good. And as you see, adjective clause goes immediately after the noun. So this is the adjective clause and this is the adjective clause. And it goes immediately after the noun, and they can appear in the middle or end of the sentence. Here, this sentence ends with the adjectival clause. So the woman is filling the glass. So here we have the main clause. And the main clause can stand alone as a complete thought because it has its own subject, woman, and is filling as a verb and the glass as a complement. So we have subject verb complement. So it is actually enough to uh, uh, stand alone as a complete thought or be meaningful. But as you see, here we have another complement, the second complement. So this second complement functions as an adjective, but this adjective post modifies the noun. You know, the adjectives precede the noun when they are single word, and we call them attributive adjective. But sometimes the adjective, when it is in the form of phrase or in the form of a clause, it is a post modifier. It comes immediately after the noun. And here we see the clause. Why clause? Because it has the connector and it has the subject and the verb, and it tells something about the glass. So the three requirements. Here it comes in between the subject and the verb. Here it is modifying the object of the verb. So the complement is the object of the verb. But here it modifies the subject of the sentence. So the glass contains milk. So which glass? The glass that she put on the table. So it gives information about the glass. So the relative pronoun shows the relationship between the clause and the antecedent. Antecedent is the noun. So this is the antecedent. Okay, the noun which this information refers to. Let's answer this question. Sahar,
Sure.
will you please, Sarvnaz, I'm sorry, will you please answer this example? The following example shows how the sentence patterns could be tested in a structure section of the TOEFL test or
The
structured
gift,
question. Go on.
gift selected for the bride was rather expensive. I D. The gift which we
Okay,
select.
you're right. D is the best choice, but why not A?
I think, and we should choose a active clause. And this part doesn't have a which, that, or why. And relative adjective. I think it was called.
Well, you remember from our previous sessions, we talked about adverbial connectors because
Mhm.
since they're adverbial connectors, am I right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Adverbial connectors either initiate the sentence or they come in the middle of the sentence. When they
Mhm.
initiate the sentence, here we don't see they initiate the sentence because the first word is the article there. So they come either in the middle or in the final position.
Mhm.
When they are in the middle and set off the subject from the verb, this is the verb and this is the subject. And later you see the second verb. Okay? So we can, if we take this as the first verb and this as the second verb, so it is impossible because in a sentence we will have one subject and one verb, not two verbs. But we take this prompt as something which is true, and we have to choose from one of these choices to complete this. So if we choose because, so immediately after because and since, we expect to see the subject, not the verb. So that is why there is no subject, and because is not acceptable and since is not acceptable. If I choose was, the gift was selected. When you see preposition and the object of the preposition, just do away with it. Okay?
Mhm.
Then you will come with another element, and that is the second verb. So this is the first verb, was selected, this is the second verb. In a sentence, we cannot have two verbs for one subject unless they are compounded, but there is no coordinate conjunction, and that is why B is not possible. The only choice is choice D, and choice D is modifying the noun. It is adjectival clause or relative clause or adjective clause. So it has a connector, it has the subject, it has the verb, and it tells something about the gift. Which gift was rather
Uh,
expensive? Okay, so as you said, choice D is the best choice. Let's move to this chart, and this chart talks about the three most common adjective clause connectors: whom for people, which for things, and that for people and things. These are adjective clause connectors. But when we use whom, when it is showing the objective form. Okay, will you please read this part? I like the book
which you ended.
which you recommended. So we have the connector, we see the subject, we see the verb, and it tells something about the noun. So it immediately follows the noun, which is called antecedent. I like the book which you recommended. The book which you recommended was interesting. So the main clause is the book was interesting, but it tells something about the book which you recommended or that you recommended. Because the book is not animate, we use either which or that. We cannot use who. The adjective connectors can be omitted. This omission is very common in spoken English or in casual written English. In academic English, try to keep this. You are allowed to drop this one. You are allowed to drop this one because you have the subject. But this occurs in a spoken English, not in written, especially in formal written or academic written. In casual, everyday written, or informal written in terms of the register, it is possible to drop this. The book you recommended was interesting, but the book which you recommended was interesting. So for academic writing, we expect to see the connector. So it is not as common in formal English or in structure questions on TOEFL to actually do away with these connectors. We have to keep them. Very good. So, will you please start reading other adjective clause connectors? These are relative adverbs, okay? The relative adverbs,
The relative adverbs when, where, and why can also start an adjective clause. Noon is the hour where the sun is overhead.
overhead, yeah?
Yes. A clause modifies noun hour. The shop where we
It
bought the
shows
camera.
time. So do not take it as an adverb. It is an adjective. It functions as an adjective. Why? Because it follows a noun and it post modifies the noun. It tells something about the noun. The noun is the hour. Which hour? When the time, when the sun is overhead. Or the shop was near the bridge. So this is the main clause, and we see where we bought the camera is embedded to this sentence. So this clause, which sounds adverbial, here cannot function as an adverb. It is an adjective and it post modifies the noun. And here, where is the connector? We have the subject, we have the verb, and the whole clause tells something about the shop. Which shop? What kind of shop? Okay, let's say this way. So that is why we take the relative adverbs connectors or signals as adjectival clause connectors. When they immediately come after the noun and set off the noun from its verb or any noun in the sentence. Here you will see I don't know the reason. This reason there is a noun marker, so the reason is a noun, but it is the object of the verb, direct object of the verb. So why Michelle was late, it is not an adverb of reason. It is an adjective which post modifies the noun. It tells the reason. It tells or gives information about this word reason and it modifies the reason. So these are the connectors. They should have their own subject, their own verb. When we have relative pronoun, not adverbs, pronoun, pronouns can either function as the subject or we see a subject immediately after them. But when the relative adverbs, they are adverbs, they cannot function as a subject, so they do not replace a subject. So immediately after these types of adverb connectors or markers, we see the subject. Subject, subject, and here Michelle is the subject. So immediately after these, we see the subject, and then the verb, and then the whole clause modifies the preceding noun. Go on, please. Who?
Who, to a the object whom and the possessive form whom. Who and whom are used mainly for people. However, these pronouns can also be used to refer to animals that are mentioned by name and seen as persons.
Thank you so much. Look, who is one of the connectors. It is relative pronoun, okay? But it has two forms. It can have the objective form or possessive form. It is subjective, but it can have two other forms. One is objective form, whom, and one is possessive form, whose. Who and whom are used mainly for people. However, it is possible to use for animals when we mention them by name. Cat, Scooter. So we mention this cat by name. Cat, Tomcat, okay? Jerry Mouse. Who? So when you just say it as a person and mention it by name, in that case, you are allowed to use who rather than that. And we can use whose for people, animals, and things. It is possible to use whose for animates and inanimates creatures. So whose shows the possessiveness. The man whose daughter won the tournament, not his daughter. If you write his daughter, what happens? Sahar, can you tell me what? Sarvnas, can you tell me what happens?
Um, man, it's it's just incorrect.
That's true. It is incorrect. If you write his, what happens? You have two subjects. There is a non-marker. Man is the first subject. His is one of the non-markers. So daughter is the second subject. Subject two. Is it possible to have two subjects for one verb?
No.
That is why we never use his. And instead of his, which is possessive pronoun, possessive adjective, I'm sorry, we use relative clause marker. So we use whose rather than his. When you use whose, you will have subject, the man, the man is a tennis coach. So whose daughter won the tournament? Here,
Adjective clause.
this is an adjectival clause. And it tells us about the man,
Mhm.
something about the man. Okay? So that is why we use whose rather than his. The
Mhm.
dog, whose owner lets it run? Again, here we have
Adjective.
another adjectival clause, but this whose refers to the animal rather than the people. And it can refer to the tree, which is a thing. Whose branches? The tree whose branches shade my kitchen window is an oak. So the tree is an oak. This is the main clause. And we see an adjectival clause is embedded into main clause and sets off the subject from the verb. So we can use whose. And immediately after this, we will have our verb shade and let's and one. They can have a subject, so daughter, owner, branches. So the branches is the subject, owner is the subject, and daughter is the subject, and whose is the connector. So we need a connector, we need the subject, we need the verb, and we need all this to modify the noun. Okay, let's go to the difference between whom and who. Who versus whom? Go on.
The relative pronoun who may cause confusion because it has both a subject form, who, and an object form,
Uh-huh.
whom. The key to choosing between these forms is to see what the pronoun is doing in its own clause. Use who if the pronoun is the subject of the verb in the dependent clause. The people
In the
who just
dependent clause. So it not in the main clause. نرین دنبال مین کلاز ببینیم اونجا چه خبره. ببینین در خود دیپندنت کلاز چه نقشی رو بازی میکنه. چون این کانکتور دیپندنت کلازه. نقش فاعلی اگه بخواد بازی بکنه که هو هست، باید در خود دیپندنت کلاز ببینیم که آیا فاعلی وجود نداره که میخواد جاش بشینه یا نه، یا اینکه نه فاعل هست و این نقش مفعول رو داره بازی میکنه. اون موقع دیگه ما نمیتونیم هو بیاریم، به جاش باید هوم بیاریم. تو spoken English میارن ولی توی written grammar نمیارن، به جاش باید هوم بیاریم. وقتی که object of the preposition هم شد باز همین داستان رو داره. هر جا نقش objective پیدا کرد either as an object of as an object of the verb or as an object of the preposition, we use whom rather than who. We have to actually realize actually what is the function of this connector in the sentence. If we use who as a pronoun and it is the subject of the verb, so it is correct. So we can use who. The people who just boarded the plane are in rock band. Who just boarded the plane? The pronoun is the subject of the verb. So the people just boarded the plane. The people who just boarded the plane. But for whom, go on. You
Use whom if the pronoun is the object of the verb in the dependent clause. The cousin whom we met at the family reunion is coming to visit.
we met him. Okay?
Mhm.
The cousin is coming to visit. We met the cousin at the family reunion. So we see that the cousin comes immediately after the verb. So it is the object of the verb. We met the cousin at the family. So when you want to realize which pronoun to use, who or whom, just look at the inside the clause, not the main clause, dependent clause. If it functions as the subject, use who. If it functions as the object, use whom. If it functions as the object of the preposition, again use whom. Go on, please.
The pronoun is the object of the verb met. Use whom if the pronoun is the object of a preposition in the dependent clause. The agent with whom I spoke was able to help me. The pronoun is object of the preposition with.
The agent with whom I spoke. I spoke with the agent. With the agent. So with is a preposition. So the agent is the object of the preposition.
Mhm.
And here we need to use whom rather than
So
who. Yes?
the subject was I
The
in
subject
the
is I. Very good. We have the subject. When we use with whom, anyway, a clause should have its own subject. As you see Here, we met. So we see the subject. As you see here, I spoke. We see the subject. And here, who just boarded. So the connector functions as the
Subject.
subject. But here, whom cannot function as the subject because it is the objective form.
Mhm.
Very good. Let's look at this tip. Go on.
Tips. If in doubt, reward the clause to see which personal pronoun you need. He, him, she, her, etc. Then replace that pronoun with who or whom using the following rule.
Okay.
Use
This is the easiest way to distinguish. Use either the subjective pronoun or objective pronoun instead of the connector and see which one makes sense. Go on.
use who for he, she, they, we. The people who just boarded the plane are in a rock band. Reward. They just boarded the plane, so use who. Use whom for him, her, them, us. The cousin whom we met at the family reunion is coming to visit. Reward. We met him at the family reunion, so use whom. The agent with whom I spoke was able to help me. Reward. I spoke with her, so use whom.
Very good. Let's do exercise 11 on page. Will you please open your book on page 119, exercise 11. Uh, Sarvnaz, read number 3, and then we will ask Sina, and then I will call the other students to one by one answer. Okay? Thank you, Sarvnaz. Will you please
Or,
read number 3 and tell me whether it is correct or incorrect?
I just finished reading the novel whom the professor suggested for my book report. It's
Uh
incorrect.
huh. What's wrong?
Whom is it's incorrect. It should be which the professor suggested.
Excellent. I just finished the, I just finished reading the novel which professor suggested for my book report rather than whom. Very good.
Yes.
So incorrect connector. Thank you so much.
Well,
Thank you. Sina Gadampur. Sina, will you please read number 4?
Number 4. The plane that he was scheduled to take to Hawaii was delayed. I think we can use, instead of the first that, we can use whom because he boarded the plane and plane is the object, I think.
Okay. Uh, let's see what is the main clause.
Um, the plane, sorry, the plane he was going to take.
No, the plane was going to take. We don't have was going to. The plane was
And
delayed.
yes,
The plane was delayed. This is the main clause. So now we set off the subject, the plane, from its verb was delayed. So as you see, this sentence is made of subject and verb, and there is no complement. But we have embedded a clause and we have offset the subject from its verb. So as you see, the plane that he was scheduled to take to Hawaii. When you are recognizing the adjectival clauses, there were 3 requirements. First, is there any connector? Yes. Do you see any subject and verb? Yes. Does it modify the noun? Yes, it is. It makes sense. Now, when you want to see whether the connector is correct or not, should I use that for inanimates? Do we use whom for plane?
no, I don't think so.
The plane that he was scheduled to take to Hawaii was delayed. This sentence is correct, and the connector actually is the correct connector. Sina, go on with number 5.
The movie which we watched on cable last night, it was really frightening. I think it is unnecessary.
Excellent, Sina. Very good. We have extra subject in the sentence. When you have more than one verb in the sentence, watched, was. So these are two verbs. There is no connector. There is no comma. So there should be uh, some dependent clauses embedded there because we can't have two verbs for one subject. So we see that this subject and the verb has been set up by some intervening elements. So the movie, it was really frightening. So movie is the subject and it is the second subject. We are not allowed to use two subjects for one verb. And that is the reason it is not acceptable. It is extra subject and it's not correct. Number 6, thank you, Sina. Let me ask Sogand and then Sayed Arif, then Seper. Sogand?
I made an appointment with the doctor whom you recommended. That's correct.
Excellent. Number 6 is correct. Okay, next one. Sogand, go on.
The enthusiasm with which he greeted me made me feel welcome. Again, correct.
Again, correct. You're lucky. Huh? All the
I
corrects.
can do another one if you want.
Okay, so read the next one. Maybe this one is three times luck, huh?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The story that you told me about Bob. This is just a subordinate clause with no independent clause to make it make sense. It's just
Excellent. Very good. We have the, and this there is a noun marker. Story is the noun. It is the subject. Then we have the connector. This connector has its own subject and its own verb. So that you told me about Bob. Okay, the story, you're just waiting for the rest of the sentence. So it is fragment. Okay? The subject is present, but the verb is missing. It is fragment. If the subject is present, the verb is missing, it's fragment. If the verb, actually, the subject is missing, but the verb is present, again, it's fragment. If both of them are absent, again, it is fragment. If they're both present, but there is a connector at the beginning of the sentence, again it is fragment because it is dependent. It cannot stand alone as a sentence because we know that the sentence is grammatically independent unit of expression which can stand alone as a complete thought. It has its own subject. It has its own verb. It actually starts with a capital letter. It ends with a punctuation, end punctuation, okay? Either a full stop or period or exclamatory point or a question mark. So let's go with a next one. Will you please continue reading this page and then we will ask the other students to continue. So again, go on.
the men with whom we're having the discussion did not seem very friendly. It's incorrect because we're missing the subject for the word the verb where.
You remember when we have whom, immediately the clause initiates. Okay? So after the connector, we expect to see the subject, but the whom is the objective form. So we cannot see any subject. That is why this is wrong, missing subject. So we can correct it by adding we before the verb word. The man we met, we with whom we were having discussion. Next one.
I'm not really sure about taking part in the plans that we made last night. It's correct.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sogyan. Sogyan, would you like to read the next parts?
Sure.
Yeah, go on, please.
Use adjective clause connector slash subjects correctly.
So it shows
In
that
skill,
the connector functions as the subject. So this slash means or. It is a connector and or subject. Okay, at the same time, it is both connector and subject. Okay, so go on, please.
in skill 11, we saw that adjective clause connectors were used to introduce clauses that describe nouns. In skill 12, we will see that in some cases, an adjective clause connector is not just a connector. An adjective clause connector can also be the subject of the clause at the same time. The woman is filling the glass that is on the table.
The woman is filling the glass. Okay, so far everything is there. We have the subject, we have the verb, we have our complement, the object of the sentence, the object of the verb. And again, we see the second complement. And this complement functions as an adjectival clause, which modifies the object, and object is a noun. So we know that adjectival clauses are post modifiers and they modify the nouns. So this is a correct sentence. And we call this a complex. By structure, the sentences are either simple, compound, complex, or compound complex. In a complex sentence, we need one main clause and at least one or more dependent clauses. Here, the type of the dependent clause is adjectival. Go on.
The glass that is on the table contains milk.
The glass contains milk. This is our main clause. But here we have dependent clause. This dependent clause has its own subject, has its own verb, and at the same time the connector is there. So the connector functions as a subject and it tells something about the glass. So it is an adjectival clause. So let's move to this question. Would you please answer this question?
Should I answer or?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the answer is B. The notebook which is on the table has 4 sections.
Well,
Should I go through the other choices or?
actually, why B is the best choice?
Okay, because
It is the
with
correct
A,
answer. Okay? B is the correct answer according to what you said. If we choose
yes.
A, what happens?
If we choose A, we have no connector. That would.
If we choose A, this is the non-marker, notebook is the subject, is the first verb, and then without any connector, we will see the second verb. So 2 verbs for 1 subject, impossible. In a sentence, we have subject, verb, complement, complement. So as you see, 1 verb, unless they are compounded, we don't see any coordinate conjunctions. We don't see any coordinate conjunctions to have 2 subjects. So number A is wrong. Why not choice D?
In the notebook is on the table. Because in the notebook would make the notebook an object of the preposition.
Very good.
And it can't be the subject.
You remember preposition plus the object of the preposition is an adverb in initial position. When a sentence starts with a preposition plus the object of the preposition, it functions as an adverb. So where's the subject? I don't have any subject. So this is wrong. What is wrong with choice C?
If we do see, we because the notebook is on the table we would have two verbs with one subject.
That is fragment. Because is a subordinate clause marker. It requires a subject. So far, so good. Then it requires its own verb. Because the notebook is on the table. So far, we have our own subordinate clause. Then we need main clause. The main clause lacks one of the core elements, subject, and the comma is missing. So we don't see any comma, we don't see any subject before has. That is why this is not possible. And as you said, the best choice is choice B, and it is the correct answer. We have the notebook, and the notebook is singular, and the verb is singular. The notebook has 4 sections, and then we see this modifying phrase